The help eats in the kitchen. Brittany's voice cut through the yacht club chatter like a serrated knife. She stood there in $50,000 of white lace, pointing a manicured finger toward the swinging service doors. The smell of stale grease and dishwater wafted out, clashing with the salt air and expensive perfume of the gala. My brother Christopher laughed. My parents looked away, sipping their champagne, pretending they did not hear their only daughter being banished to the scholarly. My heart rate did not even spike. Hysteria is inefficient. I simply processed the data. I nodded, pulled my phone from my clutch, and dialed the number I knew by heart. I made sure to hold eye contact with the bride as the line connected. "Grant," I said, my voice calm enough to freeze water. "Execute the kill switch on the Vanguard contract. All $60 million. Pull it now." Brittany's smile did not just fade, it shattered. Have you ever felt like the invisible one in your own family? Drop a waving hand emoji in the comments if you have ever had to silence your success just to keep the peace. The call ended. The screen went dark for a second. The only sound was the slap of waves against the hull of the yacht club pier. Then Christopher laughed. It was that rich, throaty laugh of a man who has never faced a consequence he could not buy his way out of. He shook his head, adjusting his silk bow tie as if he were brushing off a speck of dust. "Cute," he said, smirking at his new bride. Grant played along nicely. "Did you rehearse that in the mirror, Ashley? Or did you hire an actor?" My mother, Melissa, sighed. It was the long-suffering exhale she usually reserved for when the housekeeper missed a spot on the silverware. She did not look at me. She looked at the guests to ensure no one important was watching the scene. "Stop being dramatic, Ashley," she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. "You have made your point. Now go to the kitchen before you ruin the photos. We will discuss your little outburst when you have calmed down." They turned their backs. Just like that, they went back to their canapés, their champagne, and their networking. They thought I was a petulant child throwing a toy across the room because I did not get a slice of cake. But I was not looking at them. I was looking at the silent notification sliding across my phone screen. Vanguard Corp, ticker VGD, down 1.2%. 2%. It starts slow. The high-frequency trading algorithms catch the cancellation order first. Then the supply chain bots react. Then the rumors hit the forums. I took a step back, melting into the shadow of a decorative pillar. I watched them dance. My father, Robert, was clapping Richard, Brittany's father, on the back. Two titans of industry, one deeply in debt, the other about to be. They were celebrating a merger, unaware that the valuation of their combined empire was evaporating at a rate of $1 million a second. For 27 years, I had been an asset they depreciated daily. I was the fixer, the secret keeper, the emotional punching bag. I absorbed their toxicity so they could shine. I had treated their love like a high-interest loan I could never pay off, constantly making deposits of loyalty, hoping to one day get a return. But tonight, looking at Christopher's smug face as he spun his bride around the floor, I realized something. It was not a loan. It was a scam. I checked my phone again. Vanguard Corp down 2.8%. The red arrow was pointing straight down, a beautiful, jagged scar across the screen. Brittany was right. The help does belong in the kitchen, because the kitchen is where the food is cooked. It is where the fire is. The ballroom is just where the illusions are sold. And right now, the illusion was expensive. I did not feel angry. Anger implies you still care about the outcome. I felt nothing but the cool, clinical satisfaction of a resolved error. This was not revenge. Revenge is hot and messy. This was a liquidation. I was simply closing a non-performing account. The orchestra swelled into a crescendo. They were dancing on the deck of the Titanic, completely unaware that I had just ordered the iceberg. People usually assume the kitchen table comment was the reason I destroyed them. It was not. That was just the trigger. The gun had been loaded 3 years ago. That was the year Christopher was appointed Vice President of Strategy at Vanguard Corp. He was 28, had a degree he barely earned, and treated the company credit card like it was a high score in a video game. My parents threw him a gala just like this one. They bought him a Porsche. They toasted to the future of the dynasty. That same week, I dropped out of law school. To Melissa and Robert, it was a death in the family. I did not just quit a degree. I quit their narrative. I moved into a studio, apartment that smelled like mildew and cheap coffee. I stopped coming to Sunday dinners because I could not afford the ride share, and they certainly were not going to pick me up. "You are throwing your life away," my father had told me, standing in the doorway of my apartment, refusing to actually step inside. "You are a disappointment, Ashley. A brilliant mind wasted on whatever this is." He waved a hand at my desk. It was covered in monitors, tangled wires, and empty energy drink cans. He saw a mess. He saw a failure who could not handle the pressure of the bar exam. He did not know he was looking at the birth of Summit Systems. While Christopher was learning how to extrapolate quarterly bonuses from hollow projections, I was coding the neural network architecture that would eventually automate the entire logistics industry. I was not sleeping because I was building. I was not broke. I was reinvesting every single cent into server capacity. Vanguard Corp builds electric vehicles, but Summit Systems builds the brains that tell those vehicles where to go, how to charge, and how to drive. My family thought I was unemployed. In reality, I was their supplier. I was the silent partner they never met, the vendor 402 on their expense reports. They paid me millions, and they did not even know it was me cashing the checks. I tried to give them a chance. I really did. Earlier today, when I arrived at the reception, I placed a plain brown envelope on the gift table. It sat there, ugly and unassuming, nestled between Tiffany boxes and crystal vases. Christopher had picked it up during the cocktail hour. He weighed it in his hand, feeling how light it was. He smirked, holding it up for his groomsmen to see. "Coupons, Ashley." He had laughed, the sound loud and wet. "Did you clip these from the Sunday paper, or is this your rent money?" He tossed it onto the discard pile behind the table. "My sight, before I have security throw you out." "Christopher." A booming voice interrupted us. It was Richard. He was walking toward us, phone in hand again, his face a shade paler than the white orchids on the tables. He was not looking at the bride. He was not looking at the groom. He was looking straight at me. "Christopher, let go of your sister," Richard said, his voice trembling slightly. Christopher laughed, not reading the room. "Do not worry, Richard. I was just handling it. Ashley was just leaving." "No," Richard said, stopping 3 feet away from me. He held up his phone. The screen was glowing with a caller ID that Christopher would not recognize, but Richard definitely did. "She is not leaving." Richard looked at me with a mix of confusion and dawning horror. "Why is the chief operating officer of Summit Systems calling me?" Richard asked. "And why did he just tell me that you authorized a complete supply chain freeze?" Christopher dropped my arm. He looked between Richard and me, his face twisting into a mask of confused arrogance. "What are you talking about, Richard?" Christopher laughed, though the sound was brittle. "Now Summit Systems is a tech giant in Silicon Valley. Ashley lives in a studio apartment in Queens. She does not authorize anything except maybe a streaming subscription." He looked at me, waiting for me to cower, to apologize, to admit this was some elaborate prank. I stepped out of his shadow. I smoothed the fabric of my dress. Simple, black, unbranded, the kind of dress you wear when you do not need a label to tell you who you are. "Grant called you because I told him to," I said. My voice was not loud, but in the sudden silence of our little circle, it sounded like a gavel strike. Richard turned to me. The color had drained from his face, leaving him looking old and gray. He was not looking at his son-in-law anymore. He was staring at me with the terrifying realization of a man who just found a bomb under his bed. "You," Richard whispered. "You know the CEO of Summit?" "I am the CEO of Summit," I corrected him. "Grant is my COO, and as of 4 minutes ago, he is executing my order to seize all shipments of the NDC-4 AI chips to Vanguard assembly plants worldwide." Christopher snorted. "Mom, tell her to stop." "Be quiet, Christopher," Richard snapped, never taking his eyes off me. He was a businessman. He knew how to read a bluff, and he could see I was not bluffing. "The NDC-4, Richard murmured. "The neural drive control. The brain of your new EV fleet," I finished for him. "The cars you are launching next Tuesday, the ones that are currently sitting on the assembly line in Detroit waiting for my chips to be installed. Without them, those cars are just expensive paperweights. You cannot launch. You cannot ship. And if you cannot ship, you miss your quarterly guidance by, what was it, 40%? I turned the screen of my phone toward them, displaying the bleeding ticker. Vanguard is down 6% now. "Richard, the market smells blood." My mother stepped forward, her hand clutching her pearls. "Ashley, what is going on? You fix computers. You dropped out of law school." I turned to her. This was the moment. The invisible wall they had built between us and them was crumbling. "I did not drop out to fix computers. Mother, I dropped out to invent them." I looked back at Christopher, who was gaping like a fish out of water. "That is the problem with people like you," I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming intimate and lethal. "You saw me in sweatpants and messy hair for 3 years, and you assumed failure. You looked at my messy apartment and saw poverty. You were so busy judging the package, you never bothered to check the product." I took a step closer to him. "You thought power looked like a suit and a tie. You did not realize that in my world, power looks like code. And while you were busy buying Porsches with money you did not earn, I was building the engine that makes them run. That blindness just cost you $60 million, Richard. It is called the paradox of value. You treated water like it was free because it flows from the tap. You forgot what happens when someone turns the handle off." Richard swayed slightly. He grabbed the edge of the seafood tower table to steady himself. "Ashley," he choked out, "please, the launch, the investors. If we miss this window, then Vanguard enters a liquidity crisis." I said simply, "I know. I read your financials. They are public record. You cannot do this." Christopher stammered, finally finding his voice, though it was high and thin. "We are family." "Family?" I raised an eyebrow. "Family eats at the table, Christopher. The help eats in the kitchen. Remember?" I turned back to the trash pile where the gifts were stacked. "And speaking of family," I said, pointing a finger at the crumpled brown envelope peeking out from under a silver toaster. "You really should have opened my gift." For a moment, the only sound in the ballroom was the clinking of silverware from the other tables, oblivious to the guillotine blade that had just dropped on our corner. Richard looked at me, then at his son-in-law. The math was hitting him. He was not just losing a supplier, he was realizing he had merged his legacy with a fraud. "Ashley," my mother stammered, her voice trembling. "Please, you cannot do this. Christopher is your brother. We are family. You do not destroy family over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I repeated, my voice flat. Is that what you call 20 years of erasure? Is that what you call seating me next to the kitchen door at my own brother's wedding? We can fix this, Christopher pleaded, stepping forward. His arrogance was gone, replaced by the desperate sweat of a man watching his life catch fire. I will make you a partner at Vanguard. We will put you on the board. Just call Grant. Cancel the order, please, Ashley. We are blood. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the fear in his eyes, and for a second, I remembered the little boy who used to share his candy with me. But then I remembered the man who had just grabbed my arm and told me I was nothing. I tried to save you, Christopher, I said softly. He blinked, confused. What? I gave you a chance, I said. An hour ago, I walked into this room with a way out. I pointed to the gift table, to the pile of discarded wrapping paper and empty boxes. And there, peeking out from under a silver toaster, was the crumpled brown envelope. Get it, I said. What? Pick it up, I commanded. The coupons, the rent money, go get it. Christopher hesitated, then scrambled over to the table. He dug the envelope out of the trash pile, his hands shaking. He looked back at me, holding the crinkled paper like it was a live grenade. Open it. He tore the seal. He pulled out the stack of documents inside. It was not a check. It was not cash. It was a forensic accounting report. I watched as his eyes scanned the first page. I watched the color drain from his face until he looked like a ghost. Page 3 is my favorite, I said, my voice cutting through the air. It details the series of shell companies you set up in the Caymans, the ones you used to siphon $3.6 million from Vanguard's R&D budget over the last 18 months. Richard stiffened. He snatched the papers from Christopher's hands. He flipped through them, his eyes widening with every line. You have been stealing from me, Richard whispered, the betrayal making his voice crack. My own son-in-law. I can explain, Christopher stammered, backing away. There is nothing to explain, I interrupted. The transaction logs do not lie. Unlike you, I took a step closer to my brother. That envelope was your safety net, Christopher. Inside that dossier is a purchase agreement. I was going to buy your debt. I was going to cover the stolen funds personally, quietly, so you would not go to prison. I was going to let you resign with dignity and save this family the humiliation. I gestured to the crumpled paper in Richard's hand. That was my gift to you, a $3 million parachute. All you had to do was treat me with a shred of respect. All you had to do was open the envelope instead of mocking it. I leaned in, my voice dropping to a whisper that only he could hear. You threw your own rescue in the trash because it did not look expensive enough. You were so arrogant. You threw away the only thing that could have saved you. I looked at my parents. They were staring at Christopher with horror. The golden child was tarnished. The narrative they had built for 30 years had just collapsed under the weight of a brown paper envelope. The help is not the problem, Mother, I said. The problem is that you invited a thief to the head of the table. The music had stopped. The chatter had died. The only sound in the room was the heavy breathing of a dynasty, suffocating under the weight of its own lies. Richard let the pages of the forensic report slip through his fingers. They fluttered to the floor like dead leaves, landing on the polished marble between his expensive loafers. He looked at Christopher not as a son-in-law, not as a successor, but as a liability. Security, Richard said. It was not a shout. It was a disposal order. Richard, wait! Christopher lunged forward, grabbing the lapel of the older man's tuxedo. She fabricated it. Ashley is lying. You know me. You know who I am. Yes, Richard said, peeling Christopher's fingers off his jacket with disgust. I do know who you are. You are the man who embezzled $3.6 million from the R&D budget while smiling at me across the dinner table. You are the reason my company is currently bleeding out on the public market. Two large security guards in dark suits materialized from the edges of the room. They did not handle Christopher gently. They grabbed him by the arms, bunching the fabric of his custom-tailored suit. This is a mistake, Christopher screamed as they dragged him backward. His heels skidded on the floor, leaving black scuff marks on the pristine white surface. Brittany, tell him. Mom, Dad, do something. Brittany, the bride, stood frozen. She did not move to help him. She looked at her husband being hauled away like common trash. Then she looked at her father, and finally, she looked at the floor. She knew which way the wind was blowing. In her world, you do not stand next to a sinking ship. You get on the lifeboat. My parents, however, did not have that instinct. They watched their golden child being ejected from the kingdom, and panic set in. Real, visceral panic. Melissa turned to me, her eyes wide and wet, her mascara starting to run in ugly black streaks. She grabbed my hand, the first time she had touched me with anything other than a shove in years. Ashley, she begged, her voice shrill. Stop this! Call your people! Tell them it was a mistake! If the contract is canceled, if Christopher goes to jail, we lose everything! The house, the club membership are standing. You can fix this, Robert added, stepping closer, looking suddenly frail and old. You have the power. You can make the stock go back up. We are your parents, Ashley. Does that not mean anything to you? I looked at my hand in hers. I looked at their desperate, terrified faces. For a moment, I considered it. I considered the easy path of being the savior. I considered buying their love one last time. But then I looked at the kitchen doors. I remembered the 10 years of silence. I remembered the loneliness of the garage. I remembered that they were perfectly happy to let me rot in obscurity as long as I did not interrupt their party. They did not want me. They wanted my leverage. They were drowning, and I was just the nearest piece of driftwood. I pulled my hand away from my mother's grip. I smoothed my dress. I checked my watch. I would love to help, I said, my voice echoing in the silent ballroom. But I believe the kitchen staff needs this table back. I did not wait for a response. I did not wait to see if they cried or screamed. I simply turned around and walked toward the exit. I walked past the stunned guests. I walked past the seafood tower. I walked past the empty space where Christopher used to stand. Ashley! My mother screamed behind me, a raw, desperate sound. Where are you going? I did not look back. The double doors swung open for me. Not the service doors, but the main entrance. The cool night air hit my face, smelling of salt and freedom. Back to work, I said to myself. The next few weeks were a blur, but a peaceful one. Summit Systems absorbed the market share Vanguard lost. Christopher was indicted on 4 counts of corporate fraud. My parents put the family estate on the market. They called me twice. I let it go to voicemail. I sat in my office looking out over the city skyline. It was quiet here. No yelling, no pretension, just the hum of servers and the truth of numbers. I thought about the kitchen table at the yacht club. They thought the kitchen was a punishment. But the kitchen is where the work gets done. It is where the fire is. It is the only honest room in the house. I smiled, opening my laptop to start the day. I would rather eat alone at a kitchen table of truth than starve at a banquet of lies. If you agree that your value is not defined by where they seat you, but by what you bring to the table, hit that share button. Let us remind the world that the quiet ones are the ones building the future.